So being a Muslim, as you can already imagine, my main problem is with the Christian doctrine of godhood of Jesus. So there's a couple of questions that are related. First of all, I find this concept logically fallacious. Like there are many aspects to its logical fallacy, as in maybe one of them could be that how can God be finite and then infinite at the same time? Like this is like it's like saying that there could exist a square circle. It's a logical fallacy, right? So when we say that Jesus was God or Son of God, we are actually saying that God existed in finitude during the life of Jesus, and He also is infinite at the same time. This is logically fallacious. Now, because you are like you're coming from a historical standpoint.
Did you want me to respond to that, or you
it's a relate. Like the same question continuing. So because you're coming at it from a historical standpoint, another thing that adds, like the historical evidence that adds, like that supports this argument, is that the concept of Trinity, the word Trinity itself, it doesn't appear as a theological term till near the end of the 2nd century after Jesus. So it was first used as trias by Theophilus, the bishop of Antioch, in AD 180. So we can, and like adding up to that, when you refer to Mark chapter 14, verse 62, which is what you say is the proof that Jesus claimed to be God, are you really applying the same criteria of objectivity that you were applying previously to the Quran when interpreting this as meaning that Jesus is claiming himself to be God? Because if you like look at it completely objectively, looking at the entire text, like there is nothing in the entire text that's saying that Jesus claimed to be God. And in fact, the verse that you yourself quote is actually saying Son of Man. So, I mean,
these are great questions. Don't go anywhere.
In this fascinating video, we're going to take a good look at a moment when Nabeel Qureshi, who passed away actually not too long ago, was at Georgia Tech, and after his presentation, he did a Q&A session. Obviously, you can see that there is a Muslim man just at the stand and is asking a question in regards to the oneness of God. And his question is actually very long because he's adding other facets to this. And in one sense, he's making a bit of a statement. But here's something to understand before we get right back to the video as we take a good look at this question. And it's a question that's actually common to many Muslims. So when you go back into history, and you go back all the way to the time of Muhammad. Muhammad lived from 570 Common Era all the way to 632. And it was a time in Arabia where polytheism was the prevalent ideology. In other words, the belief in multiple gods. And it was in this polytheistic religion in Mecca that Muhammad received what he called a revelation from Allah at the age of 40. And so he began to preach this idea, there is no God but Allah. And he also claims that within Islam, that Ishmael, along with his father Abraham, that what we see in the Old Testament is this idea of monotheism. Abraham is essentially the father of monotheism. And so when it comes to Muslim thinking, when it comes to the ideas that are in Islam, Islam really promotes the idea of monotheism, a hard monotheism. In fact, they have an idea called Tawhid, which has to do with the oneness of God, and it essentially condemns idol worship. But after years of persecution that Muhammad was facing, Islam began to spread very rapidly, and monotheism began to replace polytheism in Asia. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because we need to understand a little bit about the background of what's behind this young Muslim's question to Nabeel. And it has to do with the oneness of God. And does Christianity stand up to this logical coherence in regards to who God is, what God is? And is Christianity actually polytheism or is it monotheism? So we're going to get back to this question and we're going to see how Nabeel tackles this. Really exciting.
I'm from Pakistan.
Pakistan. बहुत खुशी हुई आपसे मिलके. I had the exact same questions when I practiced Islam. What I want to point out is that first and foremost, what we have to see is what Jesus claimed for himself. Now, the secondary stuff that follows, the theological unfolding or unpacking of what he said, we can spend years and years debating what it means. But what did he say about himself? That's the first thing we want to look at. So again, that's a historical perspective. Theologians argue all day long, back and forth, back and forth. You know, theologians argue all the time, and I just sit back and watch and smile because you can't really prove it one way or another. But when it comes to historical events, we can show with relative degrees of certainty, if the evidence is good, if the records are good, what the most likely conclusion is. So first, and let me give you an answer before, if you feel like interjecting, we can talk afterwards. First, I want to point out you are absolutely right. The term Trinity is not used till the end of the 2nd century. What is the doctrine of God called in the Quran? In Islam, what is the doctrine of God called?
Tawheed.
Tawheed. Is that in the Quran? No, the word
The word
tawheed.
tawheed is a derived word from ahad.
Alhamdulillah,
which is-
good. So you understand, the word tawheed is not itself in the Quran. In the same way, the word Trinity is not itself in the Bible. This doesn't pose a problem. The Shahada is not found in the Quran. You have the components of the Shahada in the Quran, but you do not, hold on, you do not have La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah in that way found in the Quran. The hold on. The components are found in the Quran. With the Trinity, the components are found in the Bible. So,
the word tawheed does appear in the hadith.
oh, that's great, but it's not in the
Just
Quran.
narrations of the Prophet.
And the Hadith is much later. So we're looking at you asked for the Bible, and we have within the early canonical tradition, people calling God a Trinity in the early canonical tradition. In fact, much closer to Jesus' time than the Hadith were to Muhammad's time. So whichever way you stack it, when you're consistent, you end up with a stronger case for the Trinity, for Jesus' deity. Now I want to continue on to
By the way, I don't know if you caught that. It's really brilliant, this answer, because this young man is claiming that the Trinity is not in the Bible, therefore it is not a scriptural truth. But the reality is that the word Trinity has to do more with a concept that is taught. There's a kind of hermeneutics that's always sometimes presented in regards to Christians and what they believe in. But we need to look at what the Bible teaches in regards to itself and the concepts it's presenting. I really appreciate Nabeel's kind of left hook here. He kind of turns this man's beliefs upon himself, and he says, look, you guys have a teaching Tawhid, which is the oneness of God, but that didn't appear in the Quran. It actually appeared much later on. And it itself is not found in the Quran. So what we see here is Nabeel is really holding this man to the same standards. Really interesting.
your next part of your question, which is Jesus finite or infinite? The argument is that Jesus is, actually I'm going to pose it in a slightly different way. Can Allah come onto this world if He wants? Can He be in this world if He wants?
I wouldn't think so.
You wouldn't think so. So Allah's omnipotence is limited. He can't come onto this world.
It's like basically Allah Ta'ala cannot do logically fallacious things. Like He cannot create a square circle, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's something logically
But
fallacious.
how do we know that's what
certain
this
things
is?
that Allah
But how do we know that's what this is? Because, for example, in Surah Al-Imran, when Allah is talking to Moses, it says in Surah Al-Imran, I think it's Surah Al-Imran, it might be Surah 18, but double check, that Allah, as He spoke to Moses, Allah was in the bush. Allah was in the bush. So if you want to say that meant something else, well, you're going to have to argue with the Quran on that one. It seems to be pretty clear that Allah can emanate His voice from a physical place. He can be in a physical place in a sense. In the same way, I don't believe that God coming to this earth limits His omnipotence. It's not a limitation of His omnipotence. Jesus has taken on flesh. God the Father is still everywhere. God, Jesus, the Son, is here on this earth. It's a limitation in that sense, but it's not a limitation of His nature. He is both the divine and human nature. That's the argument. Now, I want to talk about briefly, and then we're going to have to go to the next question, but let's talk afterwards for sure. You asked about the Son of Man. You said He's not calling Himself the Son of God. He's calling Himself the Son of Man. I'm emphasizing to you, my friend, when this hit me, again, while I was practicing Islam, when this hit me, it hit me like a bolt of lightning. The claim Son of God, according to Jews at that time, was not anything divine. Adam was called the Son of God. Solomon was called the Son of God. In the Psalms, it says, you are gods. It's not a divine claim to call someone a son of God. But when someone refers to that Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven, who's going to receive glory, authority, and sovereign power, and people of every nation and language are going to worship Him with the worship due only to God, that Son of Man is more than just a human. He is divine. He's going to be worshipped by all people of all time. So when Jesus calls Himself the Son of Man, it's not the Son of God title. And lots of Christians get this wrong, so I'm not pointing the finger at you. Lots of Christians say, oh, Son of Man means He's human, and Son of God means He's God. No, it's the other way around. In the Jewish context, Son of God was a normal human title. Son of Man, from Daniel 7, that was something divine. Go back and read Daniel chapter 7. See that this man is worshipped by all people from all eternity. This man, or one who looks like a human anyway, is worshipped by all people alongside of God the Father. That's the one Jesus is claiming to be. Definitely understand that point that I'm trying to make. And so when you see that Jesus' claim is found there in Mark 14:62, it's found in all the Gospels, and every time Jesus uses the term Son of Man, He's alluding to that. You cannot extract that from the Gospels. So please put Mark 14:62 next to Daniel chapter 7 and see what Jesus is claiming for Himself. And we'll talk afterwards for the rest. Lord bless you, my friend.
I really love this video. I've watched it a number of times, and I think it just really illustrates the importance of apologetics and knowing the Bible and understanding what these scriptural truths are. So in just closing, I really want us to understand a little bit about the Old Testament. Yes, the Old Testament talks about this idea of God being one, right? It's found in the book of Deuteronomy. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. And there is one God, and there is no other God but He. And yes, you see monotheism as something that is argued in the Old Testament from the prophets. But also, you actually see a greater argument in the Old Testament. It's something called monolarty. And it has to do with not just so much that this God is one, but this God is different. What do I mean by that? You see, there are so many depictions of gods out there, so many depictions of who this God is, and you see this in various other religions. And what you see in this argument of monolatry is this understanding that God, in his character, is essentially different than the other gods that exist. Now, I believe with all my heart God is one, but don't get me wrong here. The primary argument in the Old Testament, God is making a difference between himself and these other gods. Now, when you get into the New Testament, we see this greater unfolding of the Godhead. We see that God, comes to this world, and we learn about Jesus, who is God in the flesh, but he also calls himself the Son of God. And, you see in John chapter 3, verse 16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Now, Nabeel honed in on this idea that Jesus referred to himself as the Son of Man, and the Son of Man is of itself a divine title. But let's just take a bit of a different angle here. You see, those that accuse Jesus of being the Son of God, and they're saying he's the Son of God, therefore he is not God, you can turn back and you can say to them, but Jesus calls himself the Son of Man. What's my point? Now, a son of man, is he a man? And the answer is yes. Was Jesus a man? Yes. Did that stop him from being the Son of Man? No, right? And so when Jesus calls himself the Son of God, that doesn't in any way dismiss the idea that he himself was God. You see, what God is doing throughout the Old and into the New Testament, he's unfolding his nature. He is sharing something about himself, and that is he is community. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit have taken on these roles to reveal themselves. This infinite God has taken on these roles to reveal himself to his finite creations. In Hinduism, they teach this idea that God is so great, God is so big, God is so high and holy that one cannot truly know him. And any kind of articulation about God would be somehow diminishing of his nature. But they forget one thing. God is able to reveal himself. God can self-identify. God himself can make himself known. And that's what you see throughout the Old and New Testament. And so if Muhammad talked to Jesus and Jesus talked to Muhammad, and Muhammad says, God has a son, that sounds so strange. How can God have a son? That doesn't make any sense. I believe Jesus might say it's not that God had a son. It's that God became a son. Hi, my name is Anil Kanda. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel for more exciting content.